Another thing you can do with the data sources window is customize what the set of controls are that it's capable of generating when you do your drag and drop operations. If you drop down this list, I already covered the fact that the defaults here include data grid, list, and details. The reason for that is it assumes when you add an entity type or an object here that you're talking about a collection of those. If we go to customize here, you can see the dialog comes up that allows us to change the mapping there. And you can see the checkboxes there for data grid and list, and details is just kind of a built-in one that generates a form, as we talked about before. But the important thing is at the top, you can see it's mapped to a data type of list, a conceptual collection of a given entity type. If you drop that down and go to something like string, then what this is showing is if you're dealing with an individual property of an entity that's of type string, this is the collection of controls it's going to show as options when you go to customize what it's going to generate on drag drop. You can see at the bottom there's a link. You can even add custom controls of your own, and third-party component libraries will show up in this list as well. And you can just check additional things. So for example, if I wanted to go back to the list and say I want to be able to generate a combo box when I drag and drop an entity type that represents a list, I can click OK there. And then now I could drop this down, select combo box, drag and drop, and you can see the sizing's kind of funky, but it generated a combo box. And if we go look at the XAML, what it created for me was a combo box with the item source bound to the current data context, because it saw that that combo box was dropped inside of a grid that already had a customer view source hooked up, so it could data bind to that. Now notice a couple other things about dropping a combo box like this. One is that it hooks up two other properties relative to data binding that are important. The display member path property indicates what property on the individual objects in the collection you're binding to should be used to render text in the combo box. And the selected value path is going to be used to point to another property on that same object that can be used to track a value, typically a primary key type of value. You can see by default here, it set both of those to the same property. And if we look at our data sources window and expand the customer, we can see it picked city, even though that was marked to none. And that's because it's the first string property that it found on the customer alphabetically. So as I talked about when dragging and dropping and generating a form, it's always going to generate things based on the alphabetical order of the properties on the object. So you may have to do some tweaking of the XAML afterwards. And the display member path and selected value path, it's rarely going to get correct. So you're always going to want to take a look at those and adjust the values to the appropriate property for your scenario. The other thing it did here is on a combo box, it always adds this items panel customization, setting it to a virtualizing stack panel. There are various reasons the design team chose to do that, but in general, you can kill that out of there. A virtualizing stack panel is only needed when you have a very large number of items that you're going to present in a data-bound control. If you are putting hundreds or thousands of items in a combo box, you are just torturing your users. So please don't do that for user experience sake. And if you don't do that, then you don't need the virtualizing stack panel. So notice that you can also customize at the individual property level, and this is where those other type mappings such as string come in. The set of controls presented here are based on whatever that property type is in this dialog.